Pope Francis, A Man Before His Times Part 1 Introduction, and Life of Jorge Mario Bergoglio. Introduction. On Easter Monday, the 21st of April, 2025, the world paused to mourn the death of Pope Francis, the 266th successor of St. Peter, a man who radically reshaped perceptions of papal authority in a deeply divided world. His funeral, attended by 250,000 people from across the globe, reflected a life spent building bridges rather than walls. From royalty to refugees, from heads of state to humble parishioners, the world gathered to honor a man whose pontificate had been defined by humility, advocacy for the marginalized, and relentless hope. Pope Francis was unlike any pope who had come before him, a Latin American Jesuit who chose simplicity over ceremony, dialogue over division, and mercy over judgment. His legacy reverberates far beyond the boundaries of the Catholic Church, influencing global politics, environmental activism, and humanitarian advocacy. His passing marks the end of a significant chapter in the history of Catholicism and leaves critical questions about the strategic direction of the Church moving forward. The life of Jorge Mario Bergoglio, then Pope Francis. Early life and formation. Born Jorge Mario Bergoglio on the 17th of December, 1936 in Buenos Aires, Argentina, to Italian immigrant parents, young Jorge grew up in a modest household infused with Catholic faith and Italian culture. As a teenager, a life-altering illness, severe pneumonia, left him with one lung partially removed, a physical reminder of human fragility that perhaps foreshadowed his lifelong emphasis on mercy. Entering the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, in 1958, Bergoglio distinguished himself through his sharp intellect, quiet charisma, and deep spirituality. However, his time as a Jesuit provincial leader during Argentina's Dirty War 1976–1983 was controversial. Accusations, later widely discredited, suggested he had not done enough to protect two kidnapped priests. This period of struggle and reflection profoundly shaped his humility and reserved leadership style. Rise to Archbishop and Cardinal. Ordained as Archbishop of Buenos Aires in 1998 and made Cardinal by Pope John Paul II in 2001, Bergoglio developed a reputation as the Bishop of the Slums. He eschewed the opulent Archbishop's palace for a modest apartment, cooked his own meals, and traveled by bus. His ministry was defined by proximity to the poor, an approach he would later bring to Rome. Election as Pope. Following Pope Benedict XVI's surprise resignation in 2013, the conclave elected Bergoglio, the first Jesuit pope, first Latin American pope, and first pope to take the name Francis in honor of St. Francis of Assisi. His first public appearance, simply asking the crowd to pray for him, signaled a new style of papacy, less imperial, more pastoral. Part 2 hallmarks of his papacy. 2 hallmarks of his papacy. Reformer of structures. Francis inherited a Vatican plagued by scandals, financial irregularities, internal corruption, and deeply entrenched bureaucracy. Early in his papacy, he established a council of cardinals, the C9, to advise him and began an overhaul of the Roman Curia, aiming for greater transparency, accountability, and service to the universal church. He launched sweeping reforms of the Vatican Bank IOR, promoting stricter anti-money laundering measures and external audits. Francis also worked to decentralize church governance, granting greater authority to local bishops' conferences and encouraging cultural diversity within church practices, a significant move toward dismantling excessive centralization in Rome. Champion for the poor. Pope Francis revitalized Catholic social teaching with an unrelenting focus on economic injustice. From his apostolic exhortation Evangelii Gaudium to countless speeches, he denounced the economy of exclusion, called for a poor church for the poor, and elevated the plight of migrants, refugees, and the homeless. He personally visited impoverished communities around the world, from the favelas of Brazil to the slums of Nairobi. Migrant advocate. One of the earliest acts of Francis's papacy was his pilgrimage to Lampedusa, where he mourned migrants who drowned in the Mediterranean. He continuously advocated for more compassionate migration policies, criticizing rising nationalism and xenophobia. His message, build bridges, not walls, became a defining mantra, particularly during the rise of anti-immigrant populism globally. Climate change crusader. With his groundbreaking 2015 encyclical Laudato Si, Francis became the first pope to dedicate an entire encyclical to ecological concerns. He linked climate change to global inequality, condemned environmental exploitation, and demanded urgent international action. His environmental advocacy resonated far beyond Catholic circles, influencing major political agreements such as the Paris Climate Accord. Bridge builder in faith. Francis took unprecedented steps to heal ancient divisions. He held historic meetings with Patriarch Kirill of the Russian Orthodox Church, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, restoring Catholic-Muslim relations, and Jewish leaders worldwide. His overtures extended even to non-believers, famously stating that God's mercy extends to atheists if they live according to conscience. Pragmatic progressivism. Francis opened conversations on previously closed issues, pastoral care for divorced and remarried Catholics, blessing for same-sex couples while upholding traditional definitions of marriage, and women's roles in church leadership such as appointing women to high-level Vatican positions. He advocated for mercy and discernment rather than rigid adherence to law, challenging legalistic approaches without breaking doctrinal continuity. Part 3, Final Days. Comparisons with past popes, greatest legacies. 3. The final days and the moving funeral. Battling worsening respiratory and cardiac conditions, Pope Francis faces final months with characteristic humility. Despite deteriorating health, he maintained public engagements whenever possible, embodying a pastor who walks with his people to the end. His death on Easter Monday, so closely tied to the Church's greatest message of resurrection and hope, was seen by many as a providential sign. It brought an outpouring of global mourning rarely seen in modern times. Lying in state in St. Peter's Basilica, Francis's simple wooden coffin, per his request, attracted tens of thousands of pilgrims. The Vatican observed tight security, yet the atmosphere was marked by palpable reverence rather than fear. The funeral on the 26th of April, 2025 was simple yet profound. The Mass began with Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re's homily, describing Francis as a man who touched the minds and hearts of people attentive to the signs of times. His final words, "Build bridges, not walls," resonated deeply across the world. After the Mass, his body was carried through St. Peter's Square amidst tears, songs, and prayers. The final procession to Santa Maria Maggiore, his beloved church, was especially moving, his coffin ushered in by migrants and prisoners, the very people he had championed. In keeping with his wishes, the burial was private, beneath the basilica's floor, marked only by the simple inscription, Franciscus. 4. Comparisons with past popes. Pope John Paul II. John Paul II's charismatic global leadership helped topple communism and energize millions. His funeral attracted over 3 million mourners. Yet critics noted that under his watch, many systemic issues, for example, financial scandals, clerical abuse, festered. Francis, in contrast, took a quieter but more surgical approach to internal reform, focusing not only on public gestures but systemic change. Pope Benedict XVI. Benedict XVI was a brilliant theologian but lacked Francis's pastoral touch. His papacy leaned heavily on doctrinal clarity but struggled with communication and warmth. Francis combined orthodoxy with accessibility, speaking in metaphors and stories rather than theological treatises. Earlier popes. In the pre-20th century, papal power was often more political than pastoral. Popes like Pius IX and Pius XII navigated wars and political alliances. Francis marked a return to a radically gospel-centered vision, humility, service, and mercy over power. In death, Francis redefined how a pope could be mourned, not through state pomp, but by the ordinary faithful whose lives he had touched. Greatest legacies of Pope Francis. 1. Reorienting the mission. Francis made the Church's purpose unmistakably clear. It must go outward. The Church is a field hospital after battle. He said, pastoral accompaniment, walking with sinners, the wounded, the doubters, became the new measure of Catholic faithfulness, not rigid adherence to rubrics. 2. Climate action. Through Laudato Si, Francis integrated environmental care with Catholic morality. He established the Vatican's first carbon neutrality goals, pushed dioceses worldwide to divest from fossil fuels, and inspired the creation of the Laudato Si Action Platform, a global Catholic sustainability initiative. 3. Humanizing the papacy. Francis shattered the aloof, imperial image of the papacy. His actions, like quietly slipping out of the Vatican to minister to the homeless, stunned the world and set a standard of leadership rooted in humility, presence, and love. 4. Seeds of Reform. His promotion of synodality, walking together, was revolutionary. No longer would major church decisions be handed down from on high. Instead, lay people, including women and youth, were invited to deliberate and discern alongside bishops. The potential for a more participatory, less clericalist church was perhaps his boldest legacy. 5. Courageous stances. Francis's critique of modern capitalism, environmental degradation, and exclusionary nationalism was unwavering. Even in the face of fierce resistance from powerful forces both within and outside the church, he stood firm, modeling what moral leadership in a divided age could look like. 6. A global church. Francis truly globalized Catholicism's leadership. His consistent appointments from the global south reshaped the future landscape of the College of Cardinals. His vision ensures that future popes are more likely to reflect the world's cultural and social diversity rather than only European traditions. Part 4. Strategic Future of the Catholic Church without Francis plus conclusion. 6. The strategic future of the Catholic Church without Francis. The death of Pope Francis leaves the Catholic Church at a critical crossroads. While his pontificate created undeniable momentum toward openness, compassion, and reform, the future path remains uncertain and contested. Immediate challenges. The Church is deeply polarized. Conservative factions view some of Francis's initiatives as doctrinally risky, while progressive groups feel frustrated by the slow pace of structural reform. The next pope will inherit a delicate balance between preserving unity and advancing the spirit of renewal that Francis unleashed. Synodality and inclusivity. Francis's emphasis on synodality, a listening church where laity, clergy, and hierarchy discern together, is arguably his most ambitious long-term legacy. The October 2023 TO24 synods on synodality laid a foundation for greater lay participation and decentralized decision-making. If future leaders deepen this process, it could permanently change the hierarchical, clerical culture of the Church. Rise of the Global South. Francis decisively moved the Church's center of gravity toward the Global South. Today, the majority of the world's Catholics live in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. The next generations of church leadership will likely reflect these realities more fully, bringing fresh theological insights, liturgical styles, and social priorities. An African or Asian pope could continue Francis's vision of a multicultural, missionary church or steer it in surprising new directions shaped by local contexts. Tensions ahead. Key issues that remain unresolved include the role of women in church leadership and the possibility of women deacons. Full pastoral inclusion of LGBTQ+ Catholics. Re-examination of clerical celibacy rules, particularly in missionary territories. Continued response to clerical sexual abuse with stricter transparency measures. A future papacy could either consolidate Francis's gains or attempt to roll back certain reforms, reigniting tensions among the global faithful. Diplomacy and moral voice. Francis revitalized the Vatican's role as a global moral voice, from brokering peace initiatives to shaping climate dialogues. Future popes will need to navigate a world marked by growing authoritarianism, ecological crises, and technological upheavals, continuing the delicate balancing act between prophetic witness and political engagement. In short, the Church faces a pivotal choice: to deepen Francis's culture of openness, service, and accompaniment, or to retreat into defensive institutionalism. The world is watching. Conclusion. Pope Francis reimagined the papacy for a wounded and divided world. He was a pope who walked, spoke, and suffered with his people, one who preferred the scent of his sheep over the trappings of princely power. Through his advocacy for the poor, his defense of migrants, his care for creation, and his openness to dialogue, Francis embodied a Christianity that was radical in its simplicity and revolutionary in its compassion. His funeral, with its humility and humanity, reflected the church he sought to build, not grandiose, but grounded, not distant, but deeply involved in the realities of the world. The baton now passes to a new generation, leaders and faithful alike, who must decide whether to continue walking the synodal, inclusive, missionary path he carved. History will remember Pope Francis not only for what he changed, but for the new imagination he gave to Catholicism, a church that listens, loves, and leads with mercy. As bells echoed over Rome and the faithful whispered their final goodbyes, the simple wooden coffin of Pope Francis was lowered into the earth. Yet his spirit rises still in every bridge built, every refugee welcomed, every voice of the poor raised high. Pope Francis, the Pope who built bridges, not walls. His legacy is now ours to carry forward.